Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Capability Curve. This is episode 2, 3,
Yeah,
2.
two.
Excellent, good stuff. With me, Carl Dixon, and
Me, Jennifer Cozzi. And today it's going to be me again. So I am joined by Ross Durston, who has built a career working within data analytics and leading insight teams. More recently, he set up his own business called Finding Stories, which delivers a blend of consultancy and training courses, all centered around this idea of data storytelling and supporting individuals and organizations getting that right. So today on our podcast, we're going to talk about the power of data storytelling and how important that is for organizations.
really excited to have Ross. Actually, he's worked with us and a number of our clients, and feedback and the impact he's had has always been fantastic. So
Yeah,
he's really credible guy. We really hope you enjoy. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Hi, Ross. Thank you for joining me today.
Hello.
Hello. So today we were going to talk about the power of data storytelling, which I know is a subject you have built a career around. Ross, as a very quick intro, has a long-standing career leading data analytics and insight teams, but has built a very, very strong, unique selling point around supporting organizations realize the benefit from data through really compelling data storytelling. So really excited to have you on with us today. First things first, it'd be really good if you can kind of talk us through what you see data storytelling is really being from your perspective, and also your background. How did you get into that?
Yeah, cool. All right. So data storytelling on its own, I think, is a bit of an umbrella term. Like, it's a bit of a catch-all. It means a lot of things to a lot of people. I think if I was to give it a formal definition, I think what I would say data storytelling is data storytelling is the art of transforming data, transforming statistics into understandable, engaging, emotional insights that really drive insight and action. That's what I'd kind of say in a sentence, but as a sentence, that's a bit like LinkedIn friendly. Like that's what I kind of like describe something like that as. So if I was to try to kind of like say to someone like, what is data storytelling in a more natural tone, what I'd probably say is data storytelling really is, it's the capability that allows you to create like the best quality presentations that like really stand out from the crowd, things that people really remember. I'd say it's the competency to create charts and visualizations that like, they're pleasurable to look at, they're easy to understand, and they kind of like really actually like tell a story. And I'd say it's the confidence to be able to stand up and represent your work in the best way. It's the confidence to stand up and deliver your presentations with real meaning and sort of like a really great way of kind of getting it across that kind of means that your audience engage with what you want to say, they want to listen to you, and they want to kind of like do things from it. So I think if you ever like think to yourself like, man, why can't my presentations be as good as like that person over there? Or kind of like, why can't my charts just look that little bit better? Or why can't I have the confidence to stand up in front of someone? I think what you're effectively saying is, why can't I be better at data storytelling? And without just kind of harp on about too much, I think for me, like you said, kind of like I've made a bit of a career about this. Like, to me, this is the stuff that like really matters.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've come across it as well in your work. But sorry, go on.
No, sorry, I was just going to say, I think that is something that's really key that does differentiate a lot of individuals in the space, is that ability to make an impact from the data you're analysing. A lot of organisations, and one in particular we've been working with recently, have mass amounts of customer data, but actually understanding where the opportunities are takes a really competent analyst to tell that story and bring people on board. And I think that is a skill set that we find from a search perspective much more niche in the market, to find people with that confidence.
Yeah, I just genuinely think, I think it's the stuff that really matters. So I think if you as an individual, or for you as your team, like you really want to kind of like stand out and just like, and feel different, and like feel like you're making a difference as well. These sorts of things about, writing good presentations, being able to kind of deliver them and so on, they're quite often like called soft skills. And when you call these things soft skills, they quite often feel less good than the technical stuff. And you kind of feel like, well, if I'm good at that, it probably isn't as good as if I'm good at like the technical stuff. But the reality is, these are the differentiators. These are the things that people see, they feel, they hear, and the things that stick with people. So like genuinely, like I'm going to say this right because this is something I advocate for, but like this is something that I think is like really important, and it's something that if you want to get on in a career in data, or if you want to push yourself on and be the best person you can possibly be, then being good at data storytelling, like it's not going to be the be all and end all, right? But it's going to be something that really kind of like takes you forward. And I think I've found in my own career quite early on, I can kind of come to it in a second, but like when I realized this, like I feel like I personally grew confidence in myself and I stepped forward as an individual. And I think it's definitely kind of helped me throughout my career.
That's really interesting. And I know you said that there was kind of a moment that you kind of realised that. I mean, you've already started to talk about the benefits in terms of, you know, those compelling presentations, graphics. But in terms of the impact of those benefits, I know I just said about that, you know, the realising from the data, but do you find that stakeholders become disengaged? You know, what is it that you find really makes the difference? And also, when was that moment for you that you realised that in your career that storytelling piece was so powerful?
Yeah, well, I guess maybe let me start there. So like, let me tell my own story to kind of like to try and sell this as the thing. So, but I've worked in and around data now for like 20 plus years. I'm getting a bit long in the tooth of this sort of thing, but when I started, like without sounding arrogant, like I came out of university, like, you know, I felt myself, I was decently smart and intelligent. Like, I'd done well at university. I was very numeric. I like maths based stuff. And I kind of like fell into this career of like data analytics at the time. And where I was confident was sat behind a keyboard, you know, big monitor in front of me. We didn't have laptops at the time. Like we had big monitors in front of us. And that's where I felt confident. I was asked to do a job around, you know, build a model for this, or, you know, build a spreadsheet for that, or whatever else, write some code for this. And that's where I felt confident. I'd come into work and I'd feel good about it. But literally the moment then I was asked to talk about my work to someone that wasn't one of my peers that I was sat next to, or wasn't my manager, and I had to go and talk to the stakeholders that were requesting this work in the first place, like, it almost like made me feel physically sick, like kind of going into a meeting room to talk to someone that normally I could talk to like when making a cup of tea or whatever. But like when I came and sat in that room, and again, like we didn't have laptops, so I had stuff printed out and like we had in front of us to talk these things through. Like it was like the worst thing for me. Like I was really, and I still am, really introverted, and it was something that really panicked me. And I started to almost like doubt myself, like, is this a career for me? And this thing was like really had the fear was giving me something that really held me back. And you know, it's flashing forward, like when I've managed teams and I've managed individuals, I've seen this in a lot of other people as well. Like people that tend to work in and around data, not everyone, but a lot of these people are introverted individuals that kind of got into this because they like code and they like model building, and they don't like talking about stuff. Anyway. Yeah. So I did this, and I got by as a career for about, I don't know, probably like 18 months, 2 years or something like that. And I was doing a good job. I was probably building a decent reputation, but I wasn't standing out. Like, you know, I started off at Tesco, loads of super bright people there, people that kind of like really helped me in my early career. And I was probably seen as a good analyst. That's probably where I was. That's fine. But my manager at the time, I sort of like then took over the responsibility of what was known as a trade report within Tesco, which was the responsibility of once a week you had to analyze the trading performance from the week before. You had to pull it together into a report that was then presented to the board, not by me, but by the marketing director. But you effectively gave him the report to present to the board. But then once a month, the person had that role. They had to stand up in front of everyone else within marketing, which is like 100 plus people. Like we didn't have room in the Tesco building itself. We had to go across to like the local country club or hotel or whatever it was. And you had to stand up for 10 minutes and talk about trade for the last month. And when I was asked to do this job, I was like, I'll do that bit. I'll do the bit where I'm sat behind the computer writing the thing, but I'm not going to do the thing that kind of gets me to stand in front of people. And my manager at the time, to be fair to him, kind of said, no, like this is something that you've got to get over, and you've got to be able to do this, because not only if you want to succeed in this role, this is what you have to do, but if you want to succeed in this career, you have to have the capability, you have to have the confidence, you've got to have the know-how that allows you to sit in a meeting room and talk about your work, to stand up in front of a group and present your work. Like, this is something you've got to do. I can't remember the exact thing now, but I probably went home and was like, oh man, I don't know what I'm going to do type thing. But I kind of like said to myself, well, if I'm going to do this, I've got to do it. But if I want to do this as well, I'm going to do it on my own terms. So when I saw other people presenting in this forum, most of these people worked in marketing, they were extroverted, they were kind of stood up, they had loads of emotion and loads of like body language cues in terms of how they did things. And then that wasn't me. So I kind of like thought to myself, what am I going to do that's going to be true to who I am? That means that I feel like I'm going to do a good job. And I think what I had to do, one, I had to kind of like find my own style. So I wasn't going to be the person that was really extroverted, but you know what, I could do dry humor, and like I can talk confidently, like I know what I'm talking about, so I can kind of lean on that as a crutch. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to rehearse the hell out of what I'm doing. So I'm going to be at home. I'm going to write my notes about what I'm going to say, and I'm going to stand in front of a mirror and I'm going to rehearse it, and I'm going to do it again and again and again until a point that I feel confident. And probably the first time I did it, like I probably wasn't great, but I sort of like told myself like I've put the hard work in, and if I'm not good, then I'll try and learn from, try and do something different next time. And just by constantly putting myself through that cycle, constantly working out what worked for me, and over time kind of growing my own style, all of a sudden, like this went from a place of something that I didn't want to do to be something that actually was a real strength, I thought, of mine. And other people kind of then gave me that feedback as well. Like, I'm sure I wasn't as good as everyone else, right? But like, I kind of like, it was suddenly something that went from
comfortable with.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with this to now I'm comfortable with it. And also, for me as my sort of like career brand or whatever else, like this is something that's a selling point for me all of a sudden. And then I sort of like then fell down this rabbit hole of like, well, what else can I do to kind of like get better at this? Like, how can I get better at communicating insights that drive real action? And I can't remember if data storytelling was a verb or description at the time or whatever else. But over time, this thing of like, how do you write presentations that are structured and emotional? How do you create visualizations that are really powerful and tell a great story? And again, like, how do you kind of like deliver your stuff with confidence? This is something I invested more and more time with, got more and more interested in, experimented with more and more. And then as I said earlier, as I grew and developed teams, I could see myself in other people. And I could see that they needed the push like that I got. And they needed the helping hand. But probably like not to undersell like what my manager kind of gave to me when he just gave me the push and said, get on with it a little bit. What I then tried to do, and what I've now turned into courses as well, is I try to give people the frameworks. So not only like, you've got to do this, but give them the right advice that kind of gets them to it. So that's a very long-winded but storied kind of approach of like how I went from a place of being very vulnerable and not confident to a point in which, like, again, like if I spoke to that person from 20 years ago and said to yourself, like, in 20 years' time, you're going to be, one, you're going to be doing a podcast talking about digital storytelling, but two, you're going to be delivering courses on this thing. And I'd be like, no way.
No way.
But here I am. And now that's all through, I guess, hard work, experimentation. It's through learning, and it's putting myself out there. And that's where I am today.
No, thank you so much for sharing, especially for being so honest. I'm sure that will resonate with a lot of people that listen to this. I think it's, growth is typically very uncomfortable, and all of us have things that we fear and are uncomfortable doing, and it is quite natural to then avoid them. And like you said, obviously you need that push, but actually I think there is I often find that there is this misconception when I speak to analysts or people working in data that to be really successful at storytelling or great at presenting, you need to be that extrovert that you said, you may often find in marketing, or that confident outward speaker. But actually, the majority of analysts are introverted. But this is a skill that you can learn. This is something that you can develop, and you need to do it, as you said, in the way that best represents yourself. Not everybody has to do it the same way. You have to
No.
do it the way that you're most comfortable with, and nobody has the insights, Ross, that you were going to present on that day, or another analyst may have. So being as authentic as possible, I think that's really great advice. I was just thinking as well when you were talking about that. I was going to ask why you think data storytelling is particularly relevant today, but I was also wondering that, do you find it now that you're closer to stakeholders and you now understand what they're looking for in the data, that makes that easier? Do you find that connection to the problem? This is our business strategy. Do you think organisations, sorry, I've got a double question here, but I was just thinking, do you think that the more analysts can be involved in that strategy piece, do you think that makes it more relevant today as well? Do you think that helps?
Yeah, so I think, let me try and kind of get this across. So I think empathy, I think is the right word, is a real important skill to have in data and in and around data storytelling. So the empathy to understand where a stakeholder is coming from, the problems that they are feeling, and then kind of working with them to come up with the right solutions to those problems that help them kind of like unblock something or kind of like get on or whatever it might be. And again, like, to make myself sound really old, when I started in data people, data teams, data analysts, they were the people that sat in the basement of these buildings. Like, I don't know, chief data officer and chief AI officer or whatever else. Like, these roles didn't exist, right?
Yeah.
Like, data it wasn't necessarily an afterthought, probably, in a lot of organizations, but it certainly wasn't the driving factor that I feel it is today. So yeah, flash forward 20 years, all of a sudden data people have a seat at the table much more than they did like 20 years ago. So there is a lot more opportunity now to have that empathy because you are probably closer to stakeholders than you've ever have been before. But as like kind of they said in Spider-Man, with like great power comes great responsibility. There's a job then to do to, like I said, to understand your stakeholders and what they need, and to then engage with them in a way that kind of like makes sense for them. So like, one of the reasons why data storytelling is important is because data inherently and numbers inherently for a lot of people is daunting. It's off-putting. For some people it's boring. I don't know, like, and as humans, like, I'm not an expert in this, right? But like, our brains aren't evolved to a point that numbers can like make sense. They're like abstract. They're not things that you can kind of like see or anything like that. They're weird, and like data's the same. So you have to kind of like turn that data into something that is meaningful and understanding it and engaging and so on. And so it's really important that when you are working with stakeholders and you are understanding their problems, is you kind of like talk the language that makes sense to them. You talk the language that kind of feels emotional to them. You talk the language that is going to make a difference to them. And again, like that's I think it's really important, to go back to your question, that you do stay close to your stakeholders because you understand who they are, what ticks for them, and then you can kind of like create content and products that is important to them.
Spoke to them, and we were talking, and obviously, the organisations are enabling that more these days. I think with those prominent roles that you mentioned before being more, more embedded in the organisation. But you mentioned AI then. One of the things I was just thinking as you were making your points was that yes, AI can generate insights quicker than ever, and will be playing much more of a role. But I guess to your point, that's why storytelling becomes even more important, because AI can't understand that emotion, and potentially won't have the knowledge of the context, the politics, to be able to really make those numbers matter.
Yeah, I agree. I think we you and I talked about this before. I think AI is probably democratizing data more than it ever has done beforehand. So you can vibe code your way to like a model, or you can chuck a bunch of data in and ask it to kind of like pull out some insights for you. And like, compared to where we were a few years ago, like, it's super smart. It does great things. But at the end of the day, I think, like you were just saying, unless you're creating like an automated system, a lot of the decisions that kind of come from those insights or those models that AI is building, at the end of the day, a human is going to make the decision from it. And a human also needs to have confidence that the work that has kind of gone into it is accurate and it's viable and all this sort of stuff. And like you just said as well, the right context has been provided around it that understands is something even like possible or ethical or and all of these sorts of things. And so that human input to me, and again I would say this because I'm building a career around it, like is still hugely important. And I think, like, who knows where the future will go, but for a good while now it's going to continue to be important. So yeah, like you just said, having the human that can add the context of how that insight is going to be used or kind of like is presented, and having a human to be that influence that kind of says this is something that we need to listen to. I just think that I, as an individual, if someone presented an emotional argument to me, like a human kind of presented that to me, I'm much more likely to take it in, to listen to it, to have empathy with what they have to say, than if I just see it in a chat feed on my computer screen. And so again, this is why data storytelling is really important, because as I was trying to say earlier, as data analysis and model building becomes more and more democratized and a bit click of a button, like it's not there, right? But like more like that, the inverted commas softer side of things, the data storytelling side of things is going to be more and more the point of differentiation. So if you as an individual, you as a leader of a team or whoever else wants to have, wants to have impact and drive change and wants to have influence within your organization, focusing on these elements, focusing on the way in which you're going to communicate your message in a emotional and engaging way is going to become more and more important.
Yeah, and that I definitely see that as being what gives a lot of people a real competitive edge, because even when it comes to, obviously we're just touching on AI, there still is so much work around the adoption and education on that, and a lot of the people that you will, these individuals yourself will be working with are potentially non-technical stakeholders that, like you say, need to understand the impact. And if there is, 5-10 years time in the future, more advanced analytics that are AI driven, the backbone of this, having that ability to translate that and the impact of that will really differentiate people.
I was going to say, I think you use a good word there, is translate, which I just haven't necessarily done yet. I think, again, that's what data storytelling is. It's the ability to translate something that is complex and potentially unknown and potentially daunting and scary into something that is understandable and meaningful to you as an individual. So again, as AI becomes more prominent in everyday life, and people are a bit like, well, what can we use this for? And like, is this the right thing to do? And are we doing it in the right way? And so on. Having that capability and confidence to translate that quite often quite technical and difficult to understand topic into something that is understandable for everybody within your stakeholder group, your organization, whatever it might be, is a hugely important skill and a hugely powerful skill. And following the frameworks that data storytelling gives you can take you there.
And what challenges do you find? Obviously there are some organisations and some individuals that are getting this right today, but when you work with businesses and individuals that are really struggling at getting this right, what are those common challenges that you find?
So I think one we've already touched upon is that people, again, that tend to work in data will tend to be introverted individuals on average, and they will tend to be people that care more about the model than what the model can do for you. That's a generalization, not true of everyone, obviously, but that is often kind of like what you find. And like when you talk to like leaders of teams, like, and they kind of like want help with data storytelling, quite often it's a bit like, I just can't get my team engaged around the kind of the communication side of things. So I think the inherent background of individuals and what individuals kind of got into this career for can quite often be a inhibiting factor to success. That's what kind of have to kind of come over. We've already talked about, the other problem around like AI and modern tools making kind of like data more democratized than ever. But at the same time, the secret language of data is still like really mystifying
Yeah.
to a lot of people. So although I say on one hand data is becoming more democratized, on the other hand it's becoming more and more bloody complicated at the
Yeah.
same time. So again, like this is a problem that people need to try to overcome, and data storytelling can sort of like give you that. I'd say the other thing, for the third time, I'll mention my age on this call so far. Like the other thing to make myself sound really old as well is that historically, one of the ways in which you kind of like got better at this sort of topic was being sat side by side with somebody, sat
Yeah.
by side with a person that's a few years older than you in their career, that can kind of like share the wisdom and the advice and so on. But nowadays, because we live in a much more fragmented office environment where sometimes people are in, sometimes people aren't, you're on Teams, you're not in person, you're at home and all this sort of thing. Like, I think it's a real worry, I think that's the right word, for people earlier in their career that they just don't get exposed to the same sorts of
Yeah.
experiences and learning experiences that maybe I was lucky enough to have by kind of like
Yeah.
sitting alongside by some bright and talented individuals. So if an organization wants to get better at data storytelling, they can't rely on the inverted commas easy thing of just having the person next to them that's going to like help coach them through it. And so I think, again, without trying to just like I don't know sell mine or kind of an equivalent company services, like that's why you need to invest time
In that
and
development piece.
effort into development, and you have to be much more purposeful with it because you just don't have that easy-ish crutch of like having someone like
Yeah.
alongside you that can kind of like teach you that sort of thing.
Yeah. And I
That
think
was three. Sorry, just one more quick
No, go,
one
go.
as well is just again like a problem with data storytelling or storytelling and presenting in general now is that a lot of the time we are presenting on
Virtual
computer
platforms.
screens. And inherently, that isn't as engaging and as tactile as being in the same room as someone when you're presenting something. Like you can see my shoulders, like you can't see my hands, you can't see me moving around, you
Yeah.
can't see me pointing to things. And again, like as humans, I talk about this a lot in a course. Like in my courses, at the end of the day, we're presenting to humans that have human emotions and human experiences and so on. And by getting you a step removed from that through computer screens, like it just makes engagement harder. And that's why kind of companies think about what can we do in virtual reality and this, that, and the other to try and kind of get over these things. But the reality is it's just much harder. So again, like a challenge we got with data storytelling and presenting and influencing now is, although it's easier to talk to someone than ever before because you don't have to drive 2 hours to kind of get into a meeting with someone, when you're actually talking to someone, you have to put more effort in because
You miss those moments, don't you? You miss those opening and closing moments before you actually present. Like you say, the kind of small talk, that relax, you see people's body language, you get a better read, and that's quite difficult when you're coming straight in and out of meetings to get that. I also think whilst organisations talk about wanting to prioritise those skill sets, quite often either interviews or the setup of the business itself, a bit like you were saying, it doesn't necessarily enable those skills to be developed or to come to life. Quite often we're looking for amazing interpersonal skills or that ability to translate a story, but that's not being tested effectively in an interview process, or there are not the right development paths in place for those candidates to then develop that skill set in an organisation. And that is quite compelling, I think, for candidates that are maybe more introverted, because they're looking for, I think, you need, and I think what you kind of suggested without saying it earlier, is you need an element of psychological safety to push your boundaries. You need to be in an environment where someone's going to go, it's okay to be a little bit imperfect. It doesn't have to be a perfect story for the first time, but you need, it's that comfortability to have a go. And I think that can be quite powerful to have that culture right to encourage people to do that.
Yeah, definitely. I think as leaders within organizations, like like people like talk about fail fast and like I said, having the right kind of culture for kind of the reality is you've got to let people experiment. You've got to give people the safety nets to maybe not nail it like every time. And then as an individual as well, like you've got to have you've got to have the ability to say to yourself, it's okay when it doesn't always work. Like I can think back to times when I've experimented with doing a different way of doing a presentation and it's like fallen over. Like I thought, I'll give this a go.
Yeah.
I'll be brave and I'll try and do something different. And it hasn't worked. And I've just got to then like, look at it and just kind of go, well, that wasn't right for me.
Be a bit
That's okay.
about it.
Yeah. And I've it's a bit cliche, but I've learned something from it and I'll like move on from it. And that's okay. Like you'll present enough times in your career, or you'll kind of create enough PowerPoint presentations in your career or enough charts in your career. Sometimes they'll work, sometimes they won't. But as long as they kind of work more often than not, and you have those impacts, then that's okay.
Well, I know we've touched upon it at different points with the different questions, but we're kind of coming to the end of our time together now, Ross. But I know Finding Stories is a business now that you are kind of running with almost full time. We've obviously worked together a few times in the past. You've been supporting us with consulting projects and done some training for some of our clients. But just to bring that to life for some of the people listening today, how has the business been helping organisations with these challenges, and what kind of products and offerings are you working with at the moment?
Yeah, so like myself as with our business Finding Stories, like we do two broad things, and I'll talk about one quickly and then one bit longer. So we do data consultancy type work. We go into organisations on a contractual or project basis, and we help fill the gaps where people need them. So whether that be a leadership gap they need to temporarily fill, or they've got like a project they need to deliver, got the skill set to be able to do that. And when doing that as well, like we'll try to lean on all of our like data storytelling knowledge and know-how to make sure that we kind of go in there and we understand through empathy what the problem is. We understand the stakeholders and the individuals that are in and around the piece of work that we're kind of doing stuff with. And then we'll try to kind of deliver a project then that kind of like lands in the right way and kind of lean on our skill sets in the right way. So we do that side of things. But the kind of core part of our business then is like, how can we help support individuals and teams become better at this topic that we've just been talking about? How can we get them to a place that they can have more influence in their business through data storytelling? And so we can just offer just like coaching, like individual one-on-one coaching, like, I've got a particular problem, like help us kind of like get better at this and do that. But then we've also then got structured training programs and training courses that help people get better at data storytelling. And so like if I try and think about like almost like the core spine of what we offer, like to put it back into story like parlance, like we talk about like start, middles and ends. So we've got a training course that we kind of offer to people, which we call like solving problems with data, which is all about like how at the very start of the problem, how at the very start of a project, do you understand what is the problem that a stakeholder has, and how do you kind of like have the right frameworks that allows you to truly understand what it is that they want to achieve? How do you then take that problem and how do you like disaggregate it into a series of analytical kind of like pieces of work or research that you want to kind of complete, that means that at the end of the day you're going to answer the question that is important to them. So we have a whole thing about like how do you start projects with the right intention. You then have like the middle of a piece of work that you do that we try to help support people with around like chart development and data visualization design. So chart development and data visualization design for a lot of people is I'll put numbers into an Excel spreadsheet, I'll highlight it, I'll click the button, and there's my chart, and I'll kind of put out that, and you'll see it so many times. And then like, man, have they chosen the right chart? Have they highlighted the right things? Like, does it look professional? All those sorts of things. There's a whole science to kind of get in visualization correct. So we've got a course which we call like, design better charts, which is all about like how do you kind of follow the right frameworks that allows you to kind of create the sorts of visualizations that have a real impact within your organization. We then have training courses that sit at the end of the project, which are all about how do you write great data stories. So how do you kind of write great presentations that have structure, they have like emotional engagement to them, and they have the right sort of endings as well that can, like really like drive action to them as well. So how can we like lean on the power of stories and how stories are written and how stories are created in movies and all that sort of stuff? How can we lean into all of that kind of good content that exists and has existed for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, about how we write great stories? How can you put that into a presentation that makes it emotional? And the last thing, in terms of the spine of like training courses that we offer, is all around delivering with confidence. So like you've gone all the way through your project, you've understood what it is, you've done the analysis, you've designed great charts, you've put them into a presentation. How do you then stand up in front of people or sit around a table, and how do you deliver that work with the best confidence that you can? And so again, like we keep touching upon it, you know, for a lot of people, this is the daunting part.
I would say very daunting.
And this is also the part that people put the least effort into. So we talk about in the course that quite often the first time you ever say the words out loud of your presentation is when you're in front of other people. And that can't be right. So we talk all in the last course about like, how do you live with confidence? Like we talk about how do you make sure that you have the right preparation for the meeting that makes you feel like you've kind of put the right things and the right processes in place that gives you that confidence. We talk a lot about rehearsals. So we don't just talk about like practicing the presentation. We talk about rehearsing the presentation, which we think is different. So it's you're doing the proper dress rehearsal for the thing. And then we talk about then as well, how do you manage your emotions and your nerves on the day as well? So you can put all this effort in, and on the day, like you're still going to be nervous. So what can you do around like breathing exercises and posture and language and all that sort of stuff that allows you then to kind of get in front of that audience and deliver with engagement. So we have this whole training course for that, and that training course, I've developed it alongside my brother-in-law, who's a like professional actor and director, and he's kind of like worked in theatre and TV and movies. And what we try to do is we try to work out how can we bring all the good stuff that kind of exists within that world and bring it into the boardroom. That just means that you're making a difference and you're doing the right thing. So like we got good things that we have as part of that. So that's a bit of a waffle of different things we do, but
really
we've got all these training courses, and like we said earlier, these training courses they contain lots of frameworks and learnable skills that you can develop like over time and work out the right thing for you as well. So I think we touched upon it earlier, like you don't have to be a natural born presenter or salesperson to be good at data storytelling. You just need to have the know-how and the bravery to put yourself out there and do the right things. And that's what I try to do. And again, leaning back into who I am as an individual, introverted, quiet, not always great in groups, don't like networking situations, all these sorts of things. I've tried to find the way that reflects how a lot of, I think, people that work in these roles feel, and try to kind of give people the confidence and the frameworks that allow them to kind of like to be the best person that they can be and be the individual that they can be when they present their stories to people.
That's really nice, Ross. I think that will speak to a lot of people, but also that confidence piece, you know, people don't like, I know you said a lot of the time that they present, sometimes they'll be presenting and it'll be the first time they've done so in real life. People tend to avoid things that they're fearful of.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, if it's something that you are inherently nervous about, actually over preparing can make you more nervous. But if you have a lot of structure and organisation and governance around how you're developing that skill set, I'm sure that would certainly put me at ease, and it would put a lot of other people, I think, at ease, because they can see that there's a path to kind of help develop and learn those behaviours. So no, that's really interesting. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been really nice to hear how authentically passionate you are about that. I think I always knew that it was something that you were very vested in, but actually listening, and I think our readers would agree, listening to your story around how your career has developed and those kind of points where you realise this was a skill that you almost needed to develop in order to progress, I think will resonate with a lot of individuals, especially as we said through this conversation. And as we see, especially in the market, how important that storytelling and impact element is becoming for analysts to be able to stand out and make a difference.
Yeah, for sure.
So thank you so much for your time. We will leave it there today. I will obviously link in the sharing of this to Finding Stories. So obviously if anyone has any questions and wants to reach out to you, Ross, and hopefully they'll be able to do so. But
Of course they can.
thank you so much for your time, and thank you for everyone who listened today.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Jem.
Thank you, Ross. See you soon.